In today's video, we're going to address the Shell write-down, $400 million written down in Namibia. What does it mean? Well, we're recording this video on the 13th of January, and you can see this article here from Reuters, dated the 9th of January. Now, we don't normally react quite as quickly. We like to wait a few days or weeks just to see how stories evolve. But here's the headline: Shell writes down Namibia oil discovery in blow to country. So yeah, this went out there tail end of last week, and here we are in the new week. And well, what do we make of it all? Well, this was an article in GeoExpro, and a lot of speculation, not as much factual information as you would normally get. Not really sure what to make of that one, Hank. Speculation, it appears to be rife, and there appear to be two camps. First camp is to do with reservoir deliverability. People are talking about the lack of permeability or continuity of layers. To understand that, you've got to have some pretty detailed subsurface knowledge, and there is nothing out there officially, and we'll have a look at that in a minute. There have been people talking about some great things, chlorite, and how it's formed and where it may have come from and what it might be all about. Illite has been talked about. Now, you know, when it comes to clays, really, we're not really talking about occluding pore spaces. We're more talking about blocking pore throats. That's what causes permeability. You may remember back in the 1980s, there was a great paper there by, I think it might be Nadia Smith, and it was to do with the Brent fields. And she talked about these fibrous illites, which had actually clogged the pore throats. And of course, it was a great technique. It was actually freeze-drying the core so that the hairy illites were not blasted away when you evaporated the water and it flowed through the pore throats. This was a way of actually, it was sort of sublimation. It was taking it from a solid to a gas, but not going through the liquid stage. Anyway, I kind of digress a little bit, but, you know, some of these techniques, they are understood. So that's what we're worried about, pore throats. I've seen people talking about a dual porosity system. Again, it's a lot of detailed information there. The second camp seems to be that it's to do with the amount of gas and how you can dispose of it or re-inject it, or can you get it to market? Is there a sufficient market? Is there the infrastructure to take it anywhere? There's subsets of this as the high GOR, and that may be the case. Close to the bubble point, again, that may also be the case. Limited gas structure, well, that is a fact. There is very limited gas structure in Namibia. And it's a long way away to get down to South Africa or any other place that requires a lot of gas. So, yeah, there's the two camps that are talking about why this write-down has taken place. Let's go to the Shell website. And this was a search conducted earlier today. And you can see, type in Namibia, and nothing whatsoever comes up. So bear in mind that Shell, well, they've got accounting and reserve standards. And of course, year end, this is when these reserves assessments are done and published. And it may well be that numbers have been kept on the books for some years now, since Graph was found, since some of the other discoveries were made. Of course, you know, yes, there has been issues of overstating reserves and resources in the past. Maybe this is just a case of good housekeeping. It's writing off that value. It doesn't mean that they're completely worthless, but for now, they're not being carried forward as likely to go to economic development. This is a map. This is from Jamie Vanel's, and I like this one because it's got you know, shows all the acreage, and here is Graph. Now, you know, we can't be clear. We're not sure whether the write-down is associated with one or many of the wells that have been drilled, but they include Graph, Larona, Yonka, Lesedi, Cullinan, and yeah, these are all the wells that have been drilled. So, you know, $400 million, it would certainly suggest that it's that's more than just one well. So probably several of these finds have been written down. Now, you know, again, looking at this map, and we don't really know what the basis of these field shapes is, but, you know, Graph certainly looks to be a lot smaller than Venus, and likewise than Mopani. Cullinan, well, from the results of that, I think that could probably be shown to be a lot smaller than it is, because we don't think that found anything of any great significance. So maybe an update needed over there. Likewise, this big lump over here, I think Nara 1, as best we know, didn't find a huge amount. So when you see these shapes shown on these maps, you've got to take them with a pinch of salt. We don't know where they necessarily are derived from. Yeah, we'll talk about some of these other blocks, other wells, and other licenses as we go forward. You know, my plea, well, there we go. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So we do know Shell and the co-venturers in the license, they know why they've done it. They know why they've come out and said that. We, the general public, well, we can only speculate. Was it Graph? Was it all discoveries? Bear in mind that within a couple of weeks of the Graph discovery, you know, we had a video out showing how fantastic the Venus discovery was and how groundbreaking it was. It really kind of took the attention away from Graph, and there hasn't been very much published on Graph ever since. Shell don't tend to put an awful lot of information out there. And it moved on to drill La Rona and the Sedi and all these other opportunities, but very little has been put out into the public domain. Now, in terms of reservoir deliverability, well, you know, there's always mitigation. There's always stimulation, there's fracking, there's maximizing the long hole length, drilling horizontals. That can improve the well deliverability. Now, it might not be sufficient for a deep water development. These improvements may not be enough to get it over the line. What we really have to know is, you know, are the volumes there? Is the stock tank oil initially in place and the gas initially in place? Are those numbers, are they high enough? Well, maybe they're not. We don't know. In terms of gas disposal or gas marketing, well, there are ways to minimize drawdown. Now, I'm not saying this would actually be a game changer. It might help a little, but not particularly much. It's probably the fact we do know that there is no local market, there's no gas distribution network, and it's certainly too early for a commitment to an LNG liquefaction terminal. You know, these require multi-TCF finds, and a lot of things have got to come together before you can either justify an LNG terminal onshore or a floating LNG offshore. Lots of speculation out there, but in the words of the great British war hero, let's not panic. Don't panic, Mr. Manring. Let's have a look. What's left? So we know Venus and Mopani both thought to hold a lot of promise and potentially still economic developments. Now, I'm aware that there were flow tests on these. I'm not entirely sure how many of the Shell wells were flow tested. That's not something that's too much detail on in the public domain. But we certainly know that Venus and Mopani have been tested and rates have been quoted. But yeah, they still seem to hold a lot of promise. We've got wells imminent drilling the Rhino Resources Azule Energy. You can see on the map that we showed earlier. And also in the Chevron block, we anticipate there's going to be some wells spudded there before too long. Others conducting studies, Woodside, still in a negotiation or a study period with Pan Continental, and that's on the Saturn Superfan complex. So still a decision to be made whether Woodside are going to come on board. It's an exclusive as we understand it, and if they do farm in, that'll be a firm well commitment. We've got BW Energy. You know, they've been looking to try and move the Kudu gas accumulation forward. And we do know that they're talking about an exploration prospect up to the north of Kudu, which they can see being drilled in the next couple of years. And potentially other exploration and appraisal opportunities in and around the region. In terms of economic developments, well, what do they require? They require that you know, the government and regulator are reasonable, and to the best of my knowledge, that is the case. They have got licenses in place, and they know the terms and conditions on those. And you know, political expectations are probably to see an economic development here, because it will bring in a lot of revenue to the Namibian government. And as long as the commercial goals and the commercial hurdles are met by the joint ventures, then there should be alignment. Shouldn't be any surprises. But we do know Southern Africa, it is a challenging place. Now, certainly in Southern Africa, or South Africa rather, you know, in the Utanika Basin, and Total Energies, you had two discoveries that look really, really exciting at Brulpadda and Leopard. And we now know that they've pulled out of those. Now, they have stayed in other acreage, which is yet undrilled. But obviously, that was, we think, failing to negotiate a gas price with the government. And this may be one of the issues. Now, nobody's going to kiss and tell. You know, we can only speculate what might be behind it. In South Africa, we know that Mossel Bay gas to liquids is gone. There are Russians companies in there negotiating, trying to move things forward. And we also know that there is competition really in the whole of southern Africa, because there are such huge resources have been found offshore Mozambique and offshore Tanzania and elsewhere. So there is potentially competition to actually solve any local gas requirements in this region. Likewise, we know that we're heading for a glut of LNG in the next few years. And currently we've got a huge amount of LNG sailing around the Cape of Good Hope. And that's really in response to the Houthi rebels, firing missiles at passing tankers. Now, a message from TROVE. I do remember a CEO of a company I work for, him saying, looking at an exploration opportunity, he said, well, if it's big enough, we'll drill it. I don't care what colour it is. And he was making reference to the fact that we didn't know whether we were going to find oil or gas. But if it is big enough, go ahead and drill it. And likewise, some of these opportunities here in the Orange Basin and other basins in Namibia and the region, if we've got big opportunities, they need to be tested. There may be some issues with deliverability, there may be some compositional issues, but until you drill it, you won't find out. We do know, for example, that Venus is at a different stratigraphic level to Graph. So there are very great differences when you move away into different areas within a basin. We've also read speculation, the properties should improve to the north, or they might improve to the south, or blah, blah, blah. We don't really have a great handle on what these Cretaceous submarine fans, what the provenance was doing at the time, and how they've been winnowed and sorted and migrated and deposited, and the mineralogy that's developed. This is all a lot of speculation, guys. So the times, well, they are a-changing. And we've actually seen quite a lot of projects now have actually hit the buffers because there's no possibility of flaring. You have to re-inject gas into reservoirs, taking a huge amount of capital to justify an LNG liquefaction or regasification terminal. The world has evolved, has changed. The energy map of the world is changing. We've got a video coming out on LNG in the next week, and I do recommend you have a look at that. I also recommend you have a look at this book here. I read it recently. It was recommended to me, and I thought it was a great read. It's Not Zero. No, that doesn't say net zero. It's Not Zero. And it's a bit UK specific, so may not be ideal for some of our overseas subscribers, but it talks about how an irrational target will impoverish you, help China, and won't even save the planet. Well written, and it's a good read, and it really points out that sort of these lunatic government energy policies, which were kind of talked about and on the back of some of these COP26, for example, and governments trying to look greener than green. They came out, pushed bills through Parliament. The opposition just, oh yeah, fine, that looks great. It's very, very green. It's going to save the planet. Let's not worry about that. The fact was that, some of these things were ridiculous. We didn't even know how we could possibly achieve it. There was no assessment made of whether any of it was practical, deliverable. And now we're seeing, of course, some of it is a complete nonsense. And we can see that there's probably a repeal or two on its way before too long, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to move forward. Anyway, that's my speculation. But at least I hope we've explained what we think is happening in Namibia. Thank you for watching. I hope you found that interesting. Please hit the like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Hope to see you back on our channel before too long. Bye for now. Don't throw the baby out with the bash water. Oh,